Because if someone reports to me something wrong with government money and I say, okay, let me talk to 15 people first or one person, and during the time of trying to consult, somebody moves 6 or 20 billion out, the public and Mr. President, of course, would hold me accountable. So I must confess that the first thing I felt was important was first to ask to see Mr. President and get the authority to be able to take action. So I did that, and once having frozen the account so that no money could move, I then called the head of service to ask him that I understand this was a task force was set under up. Here is what I hear and what is happening. And it was at that point that I spoke to him after I had taken action. On the issue of what has been done, yes, the KPMG listed all those things. Some of them are institutional and related to the governance of pension funds. For example, people opening accounts, multiple accounts, and who did what. So what, with the, permission of Mr. President, after we shared the report, we set up a small team. I met with the Minister of Police Affairs, the head of service, the present head of service, and myself to go through the recommendations of KPMG and see how we would deal with them one by one. And part of their recommendations had to do with the fact that certain officers, this idea of opening up accounts and moving monies around and perhaps earning monies, packing government money so you could earn interest on it. This was wrong and had to be stopped. And the names of those who were involved, have to be sorted out because it's been going on under a period of time. So we met to discuss how to go about it. We agreed that immediately to prevent such action in future, we must restructure the way the accounts of the police pension system and is run and the way it is handled, and stop the commingling of funds, for instance. Second, we would need to work to find out who were the people who had, over time, opened up these accounts so that they can be held accountable. But as you know, civil servants have been running these accounts, and there are all kinds of civil rules governing the rights of civil servants. So this is not something you can just get up and do overnight. Therefore, we decided the best course of action was to form a small team with it was agreed the permanent secretary from the Office of Head of Service, permanent secretary from Ministry of Police Affairs, permanent secretary from Finance would work so that we would make sure that we are not contravening any rules as they found out. That committee was then chaired by the Minister of State for Finance, whom I asked to chair it. And they've been meeting to sort these issues out and see who, because they didn't give all the names. They just mentioned the positions over time. So this task force, small team, actually has to go and find out during this period who was managing the police pensions and their account. That's the work that is ongoing now. Once we are clear about who was responsible at what time, then it will be easier to take action with regard to those specifics. Thank you.
And we shall have a copy, I'm sure.
Sorry?
We'll get to know about it.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, Honorable Minister, this issue of public officials moving public money around in banks and earning interest appears to be very prevalent in Nigeria. Why, we could talk about dealing with public officials. Isn't also some of these banks also culpable? Isn't that something that could be done to them to arrest this decision? Because it's beginning to become it's getting embarrassing that public officials continue to move money from one account to the other. They negotiate interest and they earn interest on that money, and they don't ever go back to public accounts. Shouldn't also the bank officials be culpable?
Thank you, distinguished. You're absolutely right. I think the two things. I actually met with the governor of the central bank 2 days ago to discuss, and I discussed this very problem with him. That from the side of banking institutions, action has to be taken, because it's also in the hunt for customers and for accounts that public officials are then enticed into opening accounts everywhere, moving monies and negotiating interest. So from a structural point of view, we have to change the way these accounts are managed. And the Accountant General's office is actually working on a way to do this, so that we prevent the moving and the development of multiple accounts, and so that we keep a better handle on the accounts in the system.
Okay.
Secondly, I also did raise this issue with him, that the banks, the need to also work with the banks to curtail this practice. And we discussed that 2 days ago.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. One other thing I wanted to ask you is, are you aware of the fact that, according to the information we received, that it's been a practice in the government that pension funds are not mop-up, that they're allowed to stay there because at times the funds will be waiting for those who have not been captured. And for that reason, if the funds are found in appropriate accounts of the departments, that do they amount to maybe fraud or something like that?
Distinguished Chairman, what I do understand and what we have done is that we feel with the Accountant General that the practice of funds staying in accounts for a long time, domiciled there, unutilized, is not a good one at a time when the government is looking for every resource in order to execute the business of this country. So from time to time, there has to be a sweep until we reform the system. The Accountant General should sweep the accounts, and he did so recently, to look at all old accounts and dormant accounts in order to recover monies that are sitting there. Because if an amount stays in an account for a long time and is not used, it means that that agency is not using it and doesn't have need for it. And so it's a waste of resources. So we do that, sweep and garner accounts that are relatively have been sitting for a long time. And we are installing a system that will help us check, so that we avoid this longevity of monies sitting around, because it's quite suspicious for an agency to have money and not use it. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we said so, but we were told it was a practice in the system that pension funds are not mopped, they are allowed to sit there. So I think it's okay, because we feel if they are not used, they should be sent to where they are needed immediately, until when verifications are done, and then you now know the needs, further needs of the pension offices, then you also provide money, than the money just sitting like that. But I think actually, in terms of savings, because that's why we couldn't identify or classify it as fraud also, since they were sitting in government accounts. But what we are trying to unravel is where those accounts were put in either fictitious names or in manners that cannot be explained to the system or to the government. And that's what we are trying to find out also, because actually our situation is that we are so touched by the plight of the pensioners, and we are also touched by the fact that pension funds have been converted to a whole corruption industry, and we must stop it. It is the thing that we must stop.
Mr. Chairman, I couldn't share your sentiments more. I really felt strongly about this, and this is also one of the reasons why we moved quickly to freeze the monies, because this issue of allowing our pensioners to suffer whilst their monies are being moved around or being misappropriated is one that absolutely has to stop. And I want to tell you that Mr. President, the minute he heard this, wanted swift action, because he has very much the plight of the pensioners as one of his top priorities, and that is why on the spot he said, go right ahead and make sure that whatever action is needed in order to prevent pensioners from suffering and preventing us from losing monies should be done. Secondly, also the issue of commingling of funds is also not appropriate. it should not be the practice that there is any dipping into pension funds to pay for any other activities, including administration of those funds. Pension funds must be left to pay pensioners.